Good day, lords and ladies. I've hit double digits with my subscribers. Now there's 10 of you out there. This means if I get any more, I'm going to have to start taking off my socks to keep track of you all. If we can manage to get up to 100 subscribers, I'll do some kind of prize giveaway, but we'll talk about that closer to if I ever get there. Today we'll be discussing a speculation roster for Cathay for Total War Warhammer 3. At this point in time, they haven't released any announcement of any kind for Total War Warhammer 3, but I and many others believe that Cathay will be released at some point. Cathay never had an official rulebook for the tabletop, and it barely had any lore. It was a far-off, mysterious place. I will be making a speculation roster on the kind of things that we might be able to expect to see for the next installment of Warhammer. I'll be using a lot of influence from a couple sources. The Dragon Empire, made by Titanforge, and Cathay, by Matthias Eliasson, which can be found on Issue. I'll leave a link for both of these in the description below. First, we'll start off with the lords that we might see. The Warlord. This will be your typical melee-based lord, with a few different mount options. Horse, chariot, and possibly a dragon. I don't see a whole lot of options to make this guy unique aside from being a human on a dragon. Next, we have a Wugen. This is a powerful caster with limited mount options, possibly only a horse. Their lores of magic will be very limited. Cathay will almost certainly have their own magical lore, which we won't get into today. But they'll also likely have access to at least a few of the basic lores. Life, light, and heavens, to say the least. Before we get much further, I just want to say I'm sorry if I butcher any of these pronunciations. I've never been to any part of Asia, and I'm about as white as a styrofoam cup. Now on to the heroes. Dizhu. This will be the standard melee lord, with typical skills you'd see for them. Limited mount options, probably just a horse and a chariot. The Strategist. This will mostly be a boosting hero, similar to the Dwarf Engineer and the Vampire Coast Gunnery Wight. They'll have skills and abilities to boost war machines and infantry units. A Daruma, or Monk. This is a martial arts hero which will likely perform a similar function to the Skaven and Dark Elf Assassins. They'll have low armor, but a high melee attack and melee defense, efficient for dueling characters, but easy to take out when they get mobbed down by other units. They will have no mount options. Now, we'll be moving on to the melee infantry units. Imperial infantry will be the basic infantry with a few variants. They will largely perform in a similar way as the Bretonnian men-at-arms. Their variants will include swords and spears with and without shields, and halberds. Hill tribesmen. These guys will be lightly armored and fast infantry. They'll be hard-hitting with a high attack and damage, but low armor and defense. Not a frontline unit by any means, but they'll be good for the reserves or flanking. Perhaps they'll be given a vanguard to increase their versatility. Emperor Guard are heavily armored with a halberd. They'll be just like Dark Elf Blackguard. They won't last forever, but they're a really good frontline. They'll have a good attack, good armor piercing, but where they shine is their armor and melee defense. Sword Saints will perform the opposite role of the Emperor's Guard. They'll have high armor, but can deal a decent amount of damage. Their purpose is to take on other elite infantry. They'll have high attack and high armor piercing. Warrior Monks will be a very similar unit to the Wood Elf War Dancers. They'll be fast infantry with very light armor, if any. Decent melee attack with very high melee defense. There'll be a few different variants, very much like Shogun 2. Last, but certainly not least for the melee infantry, we have the Terracotta Warriors. Stone infantry. They'll have Unbreakable and Crumble, much like Undead, along with magic resistance and physical resistance. They'll have a low melee attack, but decent melee defense and high armor. This will be one of the best units in the game for holding the line. We will now be moving on to the ranged infantry, starting with the Chuko Nu. They'll be bows with decent damage, but low armor piercing, typical for most bow infantry. Next, we have the Cathayan repeater crossbow. They will have a high rate of fire, but low damage and pathetic armor piercing. Have you ever seen how these things operate in real life? Their only real use is for lightly armored units, arguably no armor. Monkey warriors will operate very similarly to lizardmen skinks. They'll have blowpipes and a little more holding power in melee. Their best use will be for countering other skirmish units and supporting flanks. Tangishima are matchlock rifle units. Slow rate of fire, but high armor piercing. We've seen these kind of units before, nothing too new here. Firebomb throwers. These are a grenade unit, similar to what the Vampire Coast has. Not a fantastic unit, but if you hit units that are tightly cramped together, especially if they're lightly armored, you're going to get massive kills. Hand mortars. These will definitely be a late game unit, and they will wreck light infantry. They had these in Shogun 2, and they were great. It's like the Firebomb Thor, but with a much larger range. Next, we'll do Cavalry. Steppe Archers. These are your typical skirmish cav, with both bow and spear variants. They'll outperform Goblin equivalents, but not the High Elf ones. Bastion Chariots. Once again, nothing too new here, perhaps a couple of different kinds, both melee and ranged variants, but who uses ranged chariots? Unless it's the Dark Elf Scourge Runner chariot. Those are awesome. Dragonlance Cavalry will be heavy shock cav. They're equipped with halberds, and will be alright at sitting in combat, but they should be used to cycle in and out of combat. Komenu Cavalry. These guys perform the opposite role of the Dragonlance cav. They don't ride horses, but instead, they ride large lion-like creatures. They'll have a good charge bonus, but they'll be great at sitting in combat and grinding it out. Now we're on to war machines. Shinoya. This is a bolt thrower, much like the dwarf one. It only shoots one bolt, it doesn't shoot 20 like the elf ones. Dragon cannons are much like the cannons that we already have, except they'll explode on impact, dealing massive fire damage. Fantastic against most units, but if the Chaos Dwarves are on the border, perhaps there'll be better artillery to choose. The rocket launcher will be much like the Hellstorm rocket battery. With the last large update, splash damage was modified, making units like this all of a sudden much better. They might make this one a little bit differently by reducing the damage and range, but increasing the fire rate. The last piece of artillery that we'll be going over will be the Gatling gun. But I don't imagine that Dr. Gatling existed in the Warhammer world, so let's call it the Firebringer, because that's what Titan Forge called it. This will be great against just about everything, unless it's a unit hidden up on a wall. But if you have a good line of sight, then you can mow down just about everything, like the... Oh, I get it. That's what I called it, a rattling gun. Oh, I see what you did there, Games Workshop. Very clever. Monsters will be very limited. In fact, limited to one. The dragon. Chinese dragons, to be more precise. Very much a magical creature. These guys will have magical attacks and physical resistance that help them stand up against other dragons. And perhaps missile resistance, or at least an animation to make them hard to hit while they're in flight. With how Chinese dragons' movements are usually depicted, I would imagine them being very difficult to hit. I did not make any legendary lords for this list, since Cathay doesn't have much lore to begin with. I do think that some kind of Mulan type character would be really cool. There's a lot of strong female characters in the Warhammer history, but sadly we haven't seen too many of them in the game yet. This was a speculation roster, because one of my newest subscribers said that he would like one. Nothing on here is confirmed, it is all largely speculation, but if we do get a Cathay army, I believe it'll be something along these lines. Thank you for watching, everyone. Is there anything about the Cathay army you'd like to see? Is there anything here that you strongly agree or disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please hit the like button, tell your friends, subscribe for more content. Is there any other kind of videos that you guys want to see? Let me know below. And I'm off to work now, because YouTube doesn't pay my bills. I see hordes of green, red blood too. I see the doom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful war.